people to move around and, do all this. She's basically saying, well, we're willing to do this much to protect everyone from this pandemic or whatever. Maybe we should put in a curfew for men because they're the ones endangering women. And that's like the leap that she was trying to make. If I'm trying to be generous.
Well,
I'd like to believe she's not potato enough.
who's the danger?
Am I being too generous?
Yeah, hold on. In the coronavirus, who's the danger?
Anybody.
Hold on.
Anybody.
Anybody. So they did a curfew on the people that was in danger. By that logic, it would be the women that would have to have a curfew.
Oh, preach. Oh, preach. So, funny enough, the legislative proposal, though not to be enacted, was due to this exact sentiment. In a world where the men are acting up, in this case, not generally, but also generally, but in this specific case, instead of policing the men behaving badly, those men who are behaving badly, instead of policing them, you want to restrict the movement of women. And you don't know why the Baroness was proposing this legislation as a means to start a conversation. All right, well, if you don't know, let me help you help everyone else. So grab your coffee, water, tea, whatever you're drinking, go and get that. Today we're going to talk about how different social media personalities flatten complex and meaningful ideas to a simple point to feed it to their base so they don't have to engage meaningfully with anything ever at all outside of outrage culture. Let's do it. I do not believe this video is truly, though on its face it might seem that way, I don't believe it is truly a critique of Abba and Preach. I don't think it's a critique of the algorithm either. In truth, we are to be blamed, all of us, to be blamed for the flattening of ideas into binary us versus them, right versus wrong, completely stripping any nuance from general discussion about absolutely anything that has to do with man versus women and general politics. Nuance in this way become a specific thing to sidestep in order to engage in outrage culture. If you want to keep your audience, their audience, engaged, you have to. You absolutely have to reduce everything to its most meaningless form to feed to the base that is your bubble. That, for me, is the death knell in discourse. This I describe as intellectual laziness for both the audience and the creator. The balance here is hard to pin down sometimes. Do you review, research, and then reflect as the creator to provide the best content possible? Or do you provide counter arguments in an effort to engage meaningfully with that which you think you believe and that which you think other people believe so that you can get to something comprehensive and meaningful? Do you challenge the audience to think more deeply? Do you push the audience to consider alternative viewpoints and perspective? Do you believe that what you're doing is right? Or alternatively, do you feed your bias? Do you give in to the ideas that you already hold without really challenging them? Do you, in a sense, feed to your audience that which they already believe so that they can be outraged with you and maximize your viewership? The need for these exaggerated, funny quibs that essentially demonizes other groups of people as opposed to engaging with meaningful discussion around topic is kind of meaningless, and it's really reductive. Yet, this is the recipe to go viral. I do not just blame the content creators. I think audiences have a responsibility to push creators to investigate more, think more deeply, and provide more context, more information, and more thought-provoking ideas when presenting ideas in the marketplace of said ideas. before I even touch the Abba and Preach scenario, I think that it is important to reflect on something that very recently happened on my own channel and how it also helped me grow. And hopefully this empowers audience to, in the comment section, be engaging, kind, supportive, but also critical of that which they're consuming. So let me step out of the discussion momentarily around Abba and Preach and the case of the Baroness and how disrespectful they were in responding to the Baroness without engaging in why the Baroness believed what she believed. Let's step out of that and explain in large part what it is that I'm talking about when I'm discussing the responsibility I believe that the audience have and also the creator. In my video discussing Robin Europe, this video right here, I will link it somewhere up there for you guys to watch after you finish this. But in that video, there are two iterations of that video. The first one that I delete and the one that is now currently up for you to watch. During the discussion of the Robin Europe case, the facts do not matter. You can definitely go back and watch the video that I will link here. During my discussion of the Robin Europe case, I attempted to do a comparison between the Robin Europe case and the McDonald's case where a 70-plus-year-old woman was burnt by a coffee from McDonald's that was way too hot. Now, the facts did not matter to me. In that case, all I needed to do was discuss the damages being discussed in the Robin Europe case and also the McDonald's case. And so I rushed through the case of Stella, the third-degree burn she had, the amount of complaints McDonald's had that they did not reflect on or change the temperature of their coffee, even though there have been many reports of people getting burned by the coffee. The case was complicated insofar as what McDonald's knew at the time, and they knew a lot, and that this coffee was heated way too hot for consumers who are specifically consumers who are driving when they order it and drinking it while they're driving. This was a hazard if you've ever seen one. In my discussion of the case, I completely ignored the facts of the case, which I knew at the time, and only focused on the punitive damage, the dismissive tone of the message, the dismissive way in which I went with the facts and then ended up at the punitive damage to do the comparison that I wanted to make, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Obviously, I could keep this video up, but the audience wanted something more. If I was going to do a comparative analysis of a case, I needed to fully compare the case or don't do it at all. I opted to not do it at all and remove the video, edited it, and then re-upload it without that section involved, as people did not like the kind of cavalier and callous that I've developed to this case that I've read multiple times during my time in law school. That is audience capture in a positive way. Not that people are bending me to their will, but if I'm going to do an analysis of one case compared to another, even if I'm only focusing on the punitive damage, which is what I wanted to do, it is also okay for people to object to the utility or the use of that case if I suggested in any way that the burn was not as severe as it was and that McDonald's might not have been as idiotic and selfish as they were. It is important to have that kind of audience capture to let you know, reflect back to you some of the ways in which you might be overlooking meaningful discussion and context when discussing a case. So that, for me, was a humbling moment. I say this not to discuss how I updated my video and made it better because of what the audience did, but to highlight the importance of your audience feeling comfortable to highlight when you are wrong, of your audience going outside of the context of your video to do their own research and then providing information. This kind of feedback allows both the audience to grow in their knowledge and the content creator to learn and grow in his or her knowledge as well. This, I think, is important. This kind of feedback, this back and forth between the audience and the content creator is important. This mind you, is why, and because it just happened before I make this video, this is why I cannot let the audience off the hook and blame just Abba and Preach for their ignorance in what we are about to discuss. Both Abba and Preach and the audience that they have and have fostered are on the hook for their inability or unwillingness to engage more meaningfully in the context surrounding the proposed legislation that they are about to engage. Now, if you're like Themis, we have not heard anything about the proposed legislation. I understand it is coming, but I do want to set the groundwork some more. So give me like 5 more seconds, and then we'll get into the issue. I think that one of the largest problems that we now face with this TikTok generation in terms of audience capture is what sociologists and psychologists have termed ambiguity intolerance. Ambiguity intolerance is just the discomfort we feel when we cannot immediately put something in a box that we have pre-made or that we know. Does he like it or does he hate it? He might like some parts while hating some parts, and being confused about some parts does not work for a lot of audience who needs to know if you're on their side or not. It is a very simplistic way of thinking, and it is a problem online. People in this way, they want to pick a side and they want to stick to that side. Every word you speak must align with their worldview or they're gone. Again, I'm very excited and happy to see that that is not my audience who tries to engage meaningfully in dissent, and we grow from this dissent. So shout out to my audience. And even if they don't agree when it comes to ambiguity intolerance from an audience perspective, they want to feel comfortable, and the first sign of discomfort for a lot of audience means that they are going to leave. This puts the content creator in a very, very desperate, sometimes awful situation where they have to decide whether or not they're going to be honest or if they're going to placate their fandom. Placating their audience in this way means that they have to dismiss, demean, or insult people they perceive to be on the opposite side of whatever spectrum they think they are on. You get the dopamine hit here, but this is also the lowest form of engagement, and there is not much in terms of intellectual growth. When we avoid this place of uncertainty in the discussions we are having, it allows for people to reify ideas that they have without challenging them, looking as dumb as they are when they go outside of their bubble to posit ideas that has never been challenged, and then they're faced with challenges. I think the audience and this adherence to intellectual rigidity is where intellect goes to die and makes way for stupidity. Now, with that very long intro, with that long preface, and my sort of analysis sociologically around sort of the content creator audience relationship, let's get into what actually took place and why I did all of that prefacing. Hopefully it all makes sense by the end of this.
Having a defence available to householders defending themselves, but not to women in abusive relationships, defending themselves against someone they know can be dangerous and violent towards them, is discriminatory. And in the week that the woman, Sarah Everard, was abducted and we suppose killed because remains have been found in a woodland in Kent, I would argue that at the next opportunity for any bill that's appropriate, I might actually put in an amendment to create a curfew for men on the streets after 6 p.m, which I feel would make women a lot safer. And discrimination of all kinds would be lessened.
Discrimination of all kind would be lessened by discriminating against men.
You said Green Party and I went,
Yeah.
ben oui.
You know. I don't, Okay. All right. Let me switch it up.
All right then.
Let me switch it up.
You're not supposed to.
You imagine if we went to you imagine if we went to Chicago and we said we're putting in a curfew for black folks? No?
Well, yeah. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Yeah, because there's a predominantly high levels of crime in some parts of a city. No black folks. Woo! Okay. Do I need to say anything?
I don't think that's one of the video that we don't need. You know what? We're gonna switch it up. Y'all do the commentary. Cause this is beyond me. This is beyond me. You know what? Y'all do the commentary. Y'all comment it up. Y'all respond.
So since Preach said that this was beyond him and that other people, the viewers, us watching, should do the commentary, let's do what Abba and Preach could not and provide the commentary and explain what is happening here and think about whether or not this is such an idiotic, outrageous thing to suggest. The Baroness pointed out that for the next opportunity for a bill, that she might put in an amendment to create a curfew for men on the streets, which would make women a lot safer. At the next opportunity for an amendment, she would, or might rather, the key word is might, consider to create a curfew for men at 6. I know my audience. I fully am aware of my audience. And some people might even be cheering for this and say, yeah, curfew for men sounds great. Do not agree with this.
What did he say?
It is not right. It is not appropriate. And it is supposed to be a shocking thing said to start a discussion. The Baroness here was not being serious. This was not a serious proposal for a legislative action. It was not. That much was clear. And furthermore, such a curfew would be ineffective, completely ineffective. As I'm talking right now, I'll put some stats on the screen. When we're thinking about sort of homicide, specifically because, well, that is what happened to the victim in the case that is being discussed here. When we're thinking about homicide, one thing to note and why a curfew is ineffective as it relates to homicide is that most of the people who commit homicide know their victim. That is, the victim and women tend to know the perpetrators of harm, murder against them. So let's look to homicide. In 2022, the Violence Policy Center reported that 87.5% of women murdered by men in single victim, single offender incident knew the offender, 51% being wives or intimate partner. In 87.5% of murder committed against women, 1-to-1, one man, one woman, the woman knew the perpetrator. And in 58.1%, the perpetrator of this kind of harm towards the woman was in fact a husband or intimate partner. A curfew does not curb this problem. In 2018, the Sanctuary for Family reported that 92% of victims knew the perpetrator of the homicide committed against women who were murdered. So, no, a curfew is not a meaningful way of addressing the issue. We don't even get to talk about SADV abuse generally. Like, a curfew is not the answer. Curfew for men is not the answer. We need to address and police men in a different way. My first thought when I heard the Baroness Jones, spoke the way that she did was why? Why would she say something seemingly so outlandish? I would go and try to figure out, which I did, and I promise it's coming. But it baffles me that neither Abba nor Preach went to figure out the longer form of that speech. Admittedly, that's very hard to find, but also any interview around this time having to do with the Baroness, which the very next day, well, the day before she made the speech, she did an interview and follow-up interviews after this went viral. It is odd to me that there was no investigation into why she would suggest something in their mind so outlandish. The comfort with which Preach and Abba engage with the fact that the Baroness was from the Green Party and thus dismiss them highlights something about the us versus them mentality, where instead of engaging meaningfully with what is being said, the woman's position in this case is used to dismiss her points altogether. Instead of engagement, the conversation becomes, look how dumb she is, this is hysterical, she's an idiot, the Green Party is dumb, this is stupid, a curfew for men is not gonna work. I don't want to talk about it any further outside of pointing to her and laughing at her about how dumb she is, without any investigation into why. And the why matters. But before we even get to the why, I need to point this out. Intellectual curiosity is dead to these people, because I don't know why. It does bother me that none of them, neither of the two people, were sitting there thinking, okay, this is weird, this is drastic. Why would she even say this? It can't just be to prevent criminals from being criminals. Criminals break the rules. Having a rule about curfew for men is not going to prevent a man from breaking that curfew to go do what he wants to do. Hopefully they don't just think, oh, they're idiots, and reduce them, the Green Party, to idiots and not engage at all. Yet we saw videos and videos and videos and videos and videos and videos talking about how dumb she was. The Manosphere took this on, and some other people took this on, and they just took that moment and made it into this big thing about how dumb the Green Party is and how feminists want to restrict men and prevent men from walking the street because they want to protect women, and the only way they think about protecting women is by restricting men. They just want to dominate men. That was the sentiment at the time, and as I went back in the history here to look at how people were engaging, it actually is kind of sickening and frightening that so many people did videos and no one went to find out. Again, the question is why, and I know you're on the edge of your seat saying, theme is why? Okay, I will get to the why now. Before I get to the why, trigger warning. The why has a story behind it that is very, very heart-wrenching, but the details matter, and I will include the details at the cost of being demonetized for this video, because it is what it is. Okay, trigger warning, the triggerest of warnings as we get into this. This image that is going to be over my face the entire time as I get to my notes. In March 2021, Sarah Everard, on her way home, was abducted. She was then awed, strangled, and her body was burned. The police would find this the next day, and the person who did it was also a police officer who had the plan already preset and just needed a victim. Sarah Everard was the victim. He then abducted her, people saw this, took her away, awed her, strangled her, and then burnt her body. In response to this brutal murder, the politician and police officers all came out, and they were telling women, in an effort to protect women, that women should stay home. An important fact is that it was about 8:30 at night when Sarah Everard was walking home and she was abducted. So, in response, the police who arrested one of their own officers were now telling the public that women in particular should stay home and off the street at night. This is sounding a lot like victim blaming. Instead of taking ownership, putting more men out on the street, there were more lights to be installed, but instead of policing the men who were running amok at the time, but in this case, the police officer, they took it on themselves to tell women that these women were supposed to stay in their homes because if they're outside, they give more opportunity for these men to act in these ways. Do you see now how this could be a problem? When politicians and the police officers are telling women that in an effort to protect themselves, they have to stay home, there was a lot of concern. One of the reports that I can pull up from that time comes from The Guardian. The title is, it will be on here, "The Police Clash with Mourners at Sarah Everard's Vigil in London." One of the quotes, and I will not read the entire article, instead I'll just go to one quote from one of the speaker before this turned into a chaotic mess where the police officers were pushing women down and arresting them. But one of the quotes said, "We have come here today because after Sarah's disappearance, the police told women that they should stay at home to avoid being attacked. Women saying no." And you can agree or disagree. I obviously disagree with the sentiment that women should stay home instead of police should do their jobs more effectively. In response to this chaotic mess, in response to women being told to stay home, instead of women agreeing to a curfew for women, women rightfully were pushing back. Not only was this about a man or men attacking women, the curfew being imposed or being told to women to adhere to was being done by police officers after one of their own had strangled, and then burnt the body of a woman. No woman is going to take that sitting down when you tell them, as the police officer, where one of the member of your force engage in that degenerate demonic behavior, they're not about to listen to you, because again, it sounds like you're blaming women for being out, and therefore it becomes their fault that they are victims to men. That does not work. The sentiment at the time obviously was to restrict women's movement because somehow they're to be blamed for moving about and making themselves available to predators. It was in this culture that Baroness Jones would speak. It is due to this culture that the Baroness would speak up. She's not trying to impose a curfew. The curfew was meant as a way to highlight the kind of hypocrisy that underpins the ways in which women were to be restricted where men were to run amok, because men are uncontrollable, so you have to control women. That was what she was speaking to when she said that she might have an amendment for curfew for men, after women have been told that they should be set on a curfew to prevent them from being victimized. Again, you can disagree with this. You can say it is easier to protect the women if you restrict the women and police the women instead of policing the men. But you also have to recognize that this was not being said about men generally. It was that a police officer, after engaging in this behavior, was, in a lot of people's mind, being provided an out, even though he was prosecuted, but providing an out in terms of rhetoric, where women are being blamed for not staying home and being out in the street, so they become victims, and because they're victims, it's their own fault for not being home. That was part of the conversation, though it was not that direct one-to-one blame. That was what women were responding to. That was what the Baroness was responding to. Abba and Preach did not know this, did not look this up, seemed confused about what was happening. There was no real engagement. The speech itself hinted at this, discussed this, was a part of this. It highlighted what women were being told to do and how this proposal of legislation was a rallying cry to push back against the hypocrisy to tell women to stay home instead of men. Where curfew itself was not the issue, it was a policing issue. If Abba and Preach had done a single Google search, they would have come to the realization that, one, this was not a serious proposal. Rather, it was a pushback. We know this was a pushback to a culture because one of the most obvious places to look was to, finish that speech. And even if you didn't want, there were other cutouts of this lady, the Baroness, going all over Twitter. And trend all over YouTube where she was trying to explain that the speech itself is being taken out of context, that segment in the speech was being taken out of context without the rest of the speech, and they clipped her explaining that this was not about restricting men, but to start a conversation about the hypocrisy of telling women to stay home and trying to create a curfew for women. The curfew for women came first. This idea around curfew for women came first. That is what the Baroness was pushing back against. If you don't believe me, let's hear it from the Baroness herself.
Highly serious suggestion because I don't have the power to do that. I was just trying to highlight the fact that when the police victim blame by asking women to stay home, we don't react. We just think it's normal, protect women. And in fact, when I suggested about men, everybody's up in arms. So where's the difference? The difference is that there is misogyny out there and we need to fix it. A UN report just said that virtually all women, young women in the UK have been sexually harassed. And so that might be just wolf whistles, or it might be groping in bars or clubs. But basically, women experience this on a daily basis.
Abba and Preach, and for all the other content creators, large and small, that I showed earlier, you can still think this is stupid, you can still disagree with this, you can argue with her, but actually argue with what it is that she's proposing. The next time you're engaging with this kind of content, try to Iron Man that which is being said. Try. I know it is counterintuitive when you think you got what you want and you can feed it to your base, but try to understand that maybe you're wrong, maybe there's more, and try to find, this is that intellectual curiosity I was talking about, try to figure that more out, analyze it, and then use it in your content. Even if you still don't believe it's good enough, address it so that we know that there was some intellectual work. And to underscore this point, to really underscore this point, I'm going to bring up another case that was meaningful to me. I was watching Dark Matter 5225, Dark Matter 2525. I think it's Dark Matter 2525. And he brought up a really good point. Now, I forgot the video. I'm so sorry, but this came from him. Do you know this lady? This lady is synonymous in all right-wing sphere of being outrageous and just triggered liberal, progressive, leftist woman. Her name, we don't know. Her face is synonymous with that of a progressive liberal snowflake who was just outraged and yelling, and people talk about how triggered she was. Remember that. Let us watch for 2 seconds the clip of this woman and the engagement and tell me what you see. Let's watch the clip of this engagement. Let's talk about what you see.
Exist. There's not rapists coming into just because they're refugees doesn't mean they're fucking rapists.
But they're raping people in Germany.
My parents are immigrants. My fucking parents are immigrants. No, not even a fucking big percentage. Tiny.
You know how many women in the U.S.
get raped? Do you know how many?
1 in every 3
Fuck
women.
ton, a
That
fuck
means
ton.
that all Americans
That's
are
a
victims.
that's a crisis. There's a rape crisis. Exactly.
Exactly.
But if you look at what a lot of the rapes that are being reported, that is not a fact.
I can't do that.
I gotta show you.
I love you all. I want you all. I love you all. I love you all. All of you.
Now, it does not matter. If you didn't hear them, you didn't understand what was happening, that's completely fine. What we do know is the most respectful person, the person with the softest, kindest voice at the time was that lady. The frame that you see, the picture that you see that has become synonymous with outrage and snowflake and just loud, obnoxious leftist woman is the picture that you are looking at right now. I know where that frame is. In the video we just played, that frame is at the 3-minute and 33-second mark. It is at the 3-minute and 30-second mark. It is a random snapshot in a conversation that is taken completely out of context. She was not yelling, she was not angry, she was not mad, she was not loud, she was none of that. All of the people around her were louder, more obnoxious, more annoyed, and more triggered than she was. Yet that second, that frame from a video, that picture where her face moved the right way at the right time for the right-wing media was captured and disseminated and used to portray a triggered leftist woman yelling at men, and none of that, absolutely none of that happened. I am not always here to say context matters, but it does a lot of the time. You cannot strip away the context for a conversation, a picture, or whatever else without fully engaging with it and understanding it first before engaging further in a discussion. That is either intellectual laziness or dishonesty. Either way, it is not good for public discourse. I hope Abba and Preach learned from that video, and I do hope we all learned from this lady. I can't imagine what she's going through or what she went through, seeing her face on thumbnail after thumbnail, being deemed the loud, obnoxious woman when she was absolutely respectful in a conversation where men were loud and obnoxious. Do better. This is to Abba and Preach and to all of us and the audience. You have a responsibility to engage in a discourse that uplifts both yourself and the content creator. The content creator also have that responsibility. And with that, I bid you good night. That is all I have for tonight. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you again later. Before I say bye, I go live on Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. During the summer, again, I'm out zipping it and zooing it, so I don't usually come on all the Fridays, but I try to come on most Fridays. I do need to retake my life and enjoy it. So I'm gonna go touch grass. You should too. Bye.